Hey there, sleepless rabble. Tonight we're doing something golden. And by golden, I mean Versailles, the palace that redefined extra. Home to a man who literally called himself the Sun, and honestly, nailed the branding. Louis XIV, the original influencer before hashtags were even a thing. For the next hour, you'll follow him through a single day in his dazzling, exhausting world. From the moment he opens his eyes to the final curtain call at night, a life where even putting on socks was a political statement, and where perfume had to work overtime because, spoiler, Versailles didn't exactly have great plumbing. So settle in. Let me take over for a while. And hey, if this royal detour makes you smile, do the classy thing. Tap like, smash subscribe, and join the Napmax call. It's way less toxic than the one in Versailles, I promise. This is Napmax Sleep Stories. And you're listening to A Day in Versailles, the drama behind Louis XIV's perfect wig. Close your eyes and breathe in gold, because that's what mornings smell like in Versailles. Or at least, that's what they're supposed to smell like. Reality. Well, reality is a bit more complicated. Imagine a bedroom so big, you could park an entire orchestra inside without anyone noticing. Walls smothered in velvet the colour of crushed cherries, ceiling painted with mythological scenes so dramatic, they'd make Marvel blush, and mirrors everywhere, as if the Sun King needed more of himself to look at. The curtains, heavy as sin, thick enough to muffle cannon fire, and yet, even those can't keep out the faint hum of life beyond the door. Footsteps, murmurs, the rustle of silk. Because here's the truth. Privacy died the day Louis XIV decided to move his court into this golden fishbowl. And the smell. The smell. Let's not romanticize it. Yes, there's perfume, buckets of it, clouds of rose and amber swirling in the air like drunken angels. But beneath that sweetness lurks something earthy. Human. The ghost of sweat soaked into tapestries. The faint tang of candle smoke clinging to brocade. And if you breathe deep enough, the sharp note of yesterday's chamber pot hiding behind a gilded screen. Versailles didn't do plumbing. It did denial. Now, focus on the bed. A monstrous creation of gilded wood and embroidered silk, perched like a throne in the center of this theatrical stage. Drapes cascade around it in folds so rich they could buy a province. And there, sprawled like the very axis of the world, lies Louis XIV, the Sun King, 40-something, still vigorous, still burning with that furnace of ego that has kept France spinning in his orbit for decades. He stirs, slowly, deliberately, because nothing in this room happens by accident. His eyes open, dark, assessing, and already the world reacts. The premier valet, who has been waiting like a coiled spring, glides forward and murmurs the first words of the day. A prayer, soft and reverent, a whisper offered to both God and a man who thinks he's God's roommate. The lever du roi has begun. And if you're picturing a cozy private moment, forget it. This is Versailles. Intimacy is a spectator sport. The door opens wider and in flows the first wave. Princes of the blood, dukes with pedigrees long enough to trip over, ministers with faces carved into polite masks. They cluster like moths around a flame, careful not to crowd, yet desperate to be seen. Because here's the thing. Every second in this room is a currency more precious than gold. One glance from the king, a fortune, a word, a legacy. The ritual begins. The bed curtains sweep back like a theatre reveal, and there he is, hair tousled, skin glowing in the soft winter light, filtering through the curtains. He doesn't speak yet. He doesn't need to. Power radiates from him like heat. The courtiers bow in waves, spines bending, silks whispering against the parquet. Someone clears their throat and immediately wishes for death, because even sound feels dangerous here. Louis rises slowly, the sheets pooling around him like liquid silver. A valet darts forward with the first offering, a linen shirt so fine it could pass through a ring. And here's where the game begins. Because in Versailles, even handing the king his underwear is political theatre. Who gets to do it? Who watches? Who gets ignored? Every gesture is a calculation. The man presenting the shirt bows so low his wig nearly kisses the floor. He knows the stakes. He knows this single act could catapult his family into favour, or bury them in obscurity. The king accepts the garment with the flicker of a smile. Not too warm, never that, but enough to set a ripple of envy through the room. He slips it on with the grace of a man who knows he's being watched by 50 pairs of hungry eyes. And he is. They watch every movement, every breath, because here nothing is trivial. A nod is a promise. A frown is an execution waiting to happen. Meanwhile, the room hums, low whispers, the faint squeak of shoes on polished floors, the soft hiss of silk skirts as ladies in waiting glide like ghosts at the edges. Outside the windows, fountains mutter under a pale sun. Inside, the air is thick with ambition. You could bottle it, label it, sell it as the perfume of power. Notes of desperation, with a heart of envy, and a base of cold terror. And through it all, Louis is calm, serene, the perfect actor on the perfect stage. Because that's what this is. Theatre, not fashion, not hygiene. Theatre. Make the nobles crave access, and you own them. Keep them circling your flame, and they'll never notice their wings are burning. The next garment arrives. Breeches heavy with gold thread, stockings finer than mist, a waistcoat so encrusted with embroidery it gleams like starlight. Each piece handed over by a man whose ancestors once commanded armies, now reduced to valet duty. Louis slides into them with a grace that says, yes, bow lower. This is what divine right looks like. And as the final layer settles, not the wig yet, oh no, that's the encore. A silence falls. A hush so deep you could hear a pin drop. Or more accurately, the faint crunch of powdered wig dust under someone's shoe. Because the moment approaches. The crown jewel of the ritual. The door opens. A valet enters bearing the day's wig on a silver tray like a sacred relic. And honestly, it might as well be. This thing is enormous. A powdered waterfall of curls, perfumed to within an inch of its life, heavy enough to give you migraines and self-esteem issues in equal measure. Fun fact, that powder, often flour, which means if the king gets too close to an open flame, congratulations, you've just invented royal flambe. The wig descends, settles, and with it, the transformation is complete. Louis XIV is no longer a man. He is the sun. And everyone else, just trying not to get burned. The courtiers exhale as if the air had been rationed. Someone whispers praise. Another drops a bow so low it looks like a yoga pose. And the king? He steps forward, his red heels clicking like gunshots on marble, calm, untouchable, radiant. But this was just the overture. Because beyond those gilded doors waits the real stage. The council chamber, the courtyards, the endless corridors where gossip moves faster than plague rats. Politics is sharpening its claws and the day has barely begun. Clothes make the man, they say. In Versailles, they made a god. But the king isn't done yet. Because after all this lace and theatre, he needs fuel, and that fuel isn't what you think. No banquets, no feasts, just a drink so rare, it was the 17th century equivalent of a verified checkmark. Ready for breakfast? Let's follow him. They say clothes don't make the man, but in Versailles, they make the cosmos spin in your favor. Because if you thought waking up in front of 50 strangers was awkward, wait until you see what comes next. Getting dressed. And no, this isn't a quick 5-minute grab a hoodie and go situation. This is an event. A spectacle so layered in ceremony that even Netflix would struggle to script it without cutting scenes for time. For Louis XIV, dressing wasn't a private affair. It was a blood sport fought with silk, lace, and human desperation. The king moves from his bedchamber into the adjoining dressing room, the cabinet de l'habillement. It glows in the winter light, every surface flashing with gilt. Imagine a room designed by someone who took the concept of subtle and set it on fire. Gilded panels, crystal mirrors taller than men, and tables groaning under the weight of garments that probably cost more than a small cathedral. The air is heavy again with scent, violet water, ambergris, musk. But beneath it, that familiar persistent undertone lingers. A whisper of sweat and smoke, the faint rot of yesterday's chamber pot behind its decorative screen. Versailles doesn't let you forget its dirty little secret, but no one cares. All eyes are on the man of the hour, the center of gravity in this solar system of ambition. Louis XIV glides in, his linen shirt whispering against his skin, his posture radiating calm authority. He moves slowly, deliberately, like someone who knows the universe is watching. Because it is. And the courtiers, they're practically vibrating. These men, dukes, counts, grandees, whose ancestors once stormed castles, now hover like anxious shop assistants, praying for a single moment of relevance. Because here's the Versailles truth. The closer you are to the king, the closer you are to power. And nothing gets you closer than a perfectly timed wardrobe assist. Handing Louis a sleeve, that's like getting tagged in his Instagram story. Holding his cane. Congratulations, you've just gone viral. 17th century style. The ritual begins. First, the stockings. Not any stockings, silk so fine it shimmers like morning mist. A noble steps forward, bowing so low his wig nearly somersaults off his head. He kneels, trembling slightly, and slides the stocking onto the royal leg, as if cradling a relic. The king doesn't flinch. He barely glances down. And yet, that lack of attention, it's a weapon. A power play so sharp you could slice diamonds with it. Next come the breeches. Gold thread glinting like sunlit water. Fabric so heavy it could anchor a ship. Louis lifts one foot, then the other, with languid grace, letting the silence stretch. You can hear everything. The faint squeak of silk shoes on polished parquet. The nervous swallow of a duke praying he doesn't fumble a button and doom his bloodline. Then the waistcoat. A masterpiece of embroidery, every stitch a tiny war fought by invisible fingers months ago. It fastens snug across his chest, a dazzling armor of flowers and flourishes. And now, the coat. Oh, the coat. It's not clothing. It's a manifesto. Velvet so deep it swallows the light, edged with lace frothing like sea foam, buttons carved from crystal, glinting like trapped stars. When Louis stretches out his arms to receive it, the movement is almost priestly, as though he's about to bless the room with his bare existence. Meanwhile, at the edges, courtiers watch like hawks. Every gesture is a negotiation. Who stands nearest? Who's ignored? Who dares to murmur a compliment without overstepping? One man trees, voice honeyed, praising the cut of the coat. Louis answers with a smile so small it might be imaginary. But that half smile, it could alter the course of a family's future. Versailles is a place where silence speaks louder than sermons. And then, the shoes. Red-heeled, of course. You've heard of Louboutins? Louis invented the flex. Those crimson soles screamed status centuries before influencers started doing mirror selfies. Red dye wasn't just expensive, it was practically liquid arrogance. And Louis wore it like a declaration of war. Each step on those lacquered heels said, "I am here, and you will kneel." Finally, the crescendo, the wig. No chapter about Louis XIV's wardrobe is complete without this powdered monstrosity. A valet enters, bearing it on a silver tray like the Eucharist. And honestly, it might as well be divine. This isn't hair. It's a lifestyle. A towering cascade of curls so perfectly arranged it could qualify as architecture. Perfumed clouds rise as the valet lifts it high, then lowers it onto the royal scalp with trembling reverence. Fun fact, that powder, the stuff making those curls snow white and Instagram ready, was often starch or flour, meaning if you sneeze near a candle, congratulations, you've just invented flambéed monarchy. Oh, and those wigs? They didn't just smell of lavender. They also reeked of reality. Lice loved them. Which is why everyone wore powder and perfume like their lives depended on it. Spoiler. They kind of did. Now, look at him. The metamorphosis is complete. Louis XIV stands resplendent. A man cocooned in 20 pounds of fabric. Jewels glittering like frozen lightning across his chest. Wig cascading like a powdered waterfall. He is no longer mortal. He is myth. The courtiers bow so deep their vertebrae file complaints. Someone exhales, too loudly, and instantly regrets being alive. Louis glances at his reflection in a mirror so large it could double as a ballroom wall. He sees what they see. Not a man, but a sun burning in silk. And yet, behind the stillness of his gaze, maybe there's a flicker. A thought, brief, fleeting, about the fragility of all this theatre, about the cost of holding the world in orbit. Or maybe he's just wondering whether the chocolate will be thick enough today. Because that's next. Breakfast. A meal that's less about food and more about status. A ritual so quiet it hums with menace. And a drink so rare, so exotic, so scandalously decadent. It could start a war of hashtags if hashtags existed. The king turns. His heels strike the floor with a sharp, echoing rhythm. Red flashes sparking like warning lights at the edge of every step. The room ripples as courtiers fall back, bowing, their eyes clinging like ivy to his silhouette. The air smells of amber, starch, and ambition. The performance isn't over. It has barely begun. Chocolate was waiting. Thick, dark, sweet as sin. A liquid crown for a man who already owned the sun. Ready to taste the influencer drink of the 17th century? Let's follow him to breakfast. Breakfast. The word alone conjures up images of abundance. A towering buffet, platters of golden croissants, bowls of glistening fruit, and maybe even a little avocado toast for the health-conscious monarch. But if that's what you're picturing, take that image and set it on fire. Because Louis XIV's morning meal was none of those things. Instead, it was a single porcelain cup. One cup, held like the Holy Grail, approached with the reverence usually reserved for relics and coronations. Inside that cup, hot chocolate, thick, dark, steaming, and so outrageously expensive, it made diamonds look relatable. Let's set the scene. The king, now fully armoured in brocade and lace, his wig cascading like a powdered storm, glides into a smaller chamber adjoining his apartments. It's a room that glitters less than the Hall of Mirrors, but not by much. Sunlight seeps through towering windows, slicing into the air like golden knives. Mirrors catch it and fling it back, until the whole place seems to hum with light. Candles gutter in crystal holders, their flames barely flickering in the still air. The parquet floor gleams like a polished jewel. And in the center of it all, Louis, the Sun King, radiant, impenetrable, the calm at the heart of this gilded hurricane. The courtiers follow, moving in a tide of silk and whispers. Shoes click softly against wood. The scent of amber and jasmine rolls ahead of them in waves. And beneath it, that same stubborn undertone persists. Humanity, the sweat of too many bodies, the faint tang of unwashed wigs powdered to death, a ghost of yesterday's tallow smoke. Versailles is beautiful, yes, but it's the kind of beauty that requires 100 perfumers just to keep from rotting. A valet appears, carrying a tray with both hands, his face solemn as though balancing the fate of nations. Upon the tray rests a porcelain cup edged with gilt, steam curling from its lip like lazy ghosts. Chocolate, liquid luxury, imported from the Spanish colonies, sweetened with cane sugar dragged across the oceans by enslaved hands, and spiced with a pinch of cinnamon for that sinful edge. The king takes it slowly, deliberately, his fingers curling around the delicate handle with the precision of a man who knows he is performing even the act of drinking. Silence falls like velvet across the room. You could hear a lace cuff drop. Dozens of eyes fix on that cup, pupils dilating as though it held not chocolate but eternal salvation. Some of these nobles have never tasted it. They've heard rumors that it warms the blood, that it stirs the senses, that it whispers secrets to the soul, but they will not taste it today. That honor is reserved for one man only. Louis raises the cup. The steam brushes his face like a lover's sigh, and then the first sip. Slow, measured. The liquid slides over his tongue, a dark river of sweetness and spice. For a second, the mask slips. A flicker of pleasure shadows his features. Not joy. That would be vulgar. Just satisfaction. Then it's gone, buried beneath the serene facade of a god among men. Here's a historical truth bomb. Chocolate wasn't just a drink, it was a scandal. Doctors hailed it as a miracle cure for everything from melancholy to impotence. Priests debated whether it broke the Lenten fast. Lovers whispered that it was an aphrodisiac, which, frankly, was probably the only marketing strategy it needed. In a world without Netflix, chocolate was the most exciting thing you could put in your mouth without starting a war. Louis drinks again. Each sip is a sermon on supremacy, because in Versailles, even breakfast is propaganda. While the king savors his exotic nectar, peasants beyond these gilded walls gnaw on crusts of bread as famine whispers through the countryside. Taxes crush farmers into the mud, fields freeze under iron skies. But in this chamber, reality is drowned in cocoa and gold. Power tastes like cinnamon today. The courtiers hover in a semicircle, faces schooled into expressions of polite interest, though inside their thoughts are feral. If I could just taste it, just once. One drop. But they won't. They'll watch. They'll smile. They'll murmur compliments about the quality of the porcelain, or the virtue of moderation. Because that's the game. Access, not appetite. Influence, not indulgence. At last, the cup empties. A valet swoops in like a hawk on prey, whisking it away with a bow so deep it looks like penance. The rim is wiped with a linen cloth, finer than anything most men will ever touch. The tray disappears as silently as it arrived, vanishing into the labyrinth of service corridors that pulse behind Versailles' glittering walls. Louis dabs his lips with a napkin. A ripple runs through the room. The murmurs return. Sugar-sweet, cautious as cats. Compliments bloom like poisonous flowers. The king rises, his heels clicking against the floor, red flashes sparking with every step like silent gunshots. Breakfast is over. But the hunger? Oh, that's just begun. Because now comes the true feast. Politics. The grand game. The theatre where words weigh more than steel, and where a single raised eyebrow can redraw the map of Europe. Beyond the next set of gilded doors waits the council chamber, and with it, the business of running an empire so vast, it makes even Louis' ego look modest. The king walks slowly, each step measured, his silhouette framed by light like a saint in a Baroque painting. Courtiers fall into formation behind him, their whispers trailing like incense smoke. The scent of chocolate still lingers in the air, mingling with the musk of ambition. And as the doors swing open to admit him, the temperature seems to drop. Because in here, power isn't perfumed. It's sharp, metallic, like the edge of a blade. Chocolate had warmed his blood. Now came the cold calculus of rule. Behind these doors, men waited with petitions, treaties, and dreams, sharp enough to cut. This wasn't breakfast anymore. This was war in silk gloves. Ready to step inside the council chamber? Let's follow the king. Breakfast is over. The porcelain cup has vanished. The air still clings to the faint aroma of chocolate and cinnamon. And the king, resplendent in brocade and powdered magnificence, is on the move. His heels click like metronomes on the polished parquet, each crimson flash a tiny explosion of status. Behind him, the tide of courtiers swells and ripples, whispering, scheming, inhaling his wake like incense. The corridor leading to the council chamber stretches ahead like a gilded artery, pulsing with murmurs and the soft hiss of silk skirts. Candles flicker in sconces, their flames trembling in the drafts that slip through vast windows. Outside, frost claws at the glass, etching pale lace on the panes. Inside, heat blooms in pockets, from bodies, from braziers, from the sheer friction of ambition. The king moves slowly, always slowly, because in Versailles, haste is for peasants. Every gesture, every glance is calculated theatre. A nod to the left, a smile to the right, that's policy disguised as politeness. Courtiers watch, breath held, because they know a single tilt of the royal head can raise a man to glory or drop him into oblivion. It's like The Bachelor, but with wigs and more beheadings. At last, the great doors of the council chamber swing open. Light spills out, burnished and honeyed, pooling across the parquet like liquid wealth. The room beyond is a masterpiece of intimidation. A high ceiling painted with clouds and gods, walls armoured in gold moulding, and a long table gleaming like a blade. Here, under the painted gaze of allegorical virtues, men will talk of taxes, wars, and treaties that decide the fate of millions, while wearing shoes so delicate they can't walk on gravel without crying. Louis takes his place at the head, sliding into his armchair with the calm finality of a sun setting into its orbit. Around him, the ministers settle like cautious cats. Colbert is there, the financial wizard, eyes sharp as a dagger. Louvois, the Minister of War, his mind ticking like musket fire. They all bow, they all smile, but inside, they're measuring each other's throats for the knife. The silence stretches, taut as silk. Then the king speaks. His voice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Authority hums in every syllable, rich and controlled, a sound designed to remind everyone in the room that they are satellites spinning around a single, blazing star. The business begins. Reports, petitions, figures recited in tones as dry as last week's bread. But beneath the monotony slithers tension. A treaty with Spain teeters on the edge of collapse. Taxes groan under the weight of Louis's building projects, because, spoiler, gilded fountains don't pay for themselves. Colbert proposes new levies, Louvois pushes for more troops, voices sharpen, tempers fray, words clash like sabres muffled in velvet. And Louis? He listens, watches. Every now and then, he interrupts, softly, almost lazily. But the effect is electric. One phrase, and the entire room pivots. He doesn't need to shout. His greatest weapon is stillness. Make them lean in. Make them sweat. Make them guess what you're thinking while you stir the ashes of your chocolate with a fingertip. Because here's the thing. Absolute monarchy isn't about micromanaging every detail. It's about performing omnipotence so convincingly that no one questions whether you can. Louis has mastered that art. This council chamber isn't a boardroom. It's a stage. And every man here is playing his part in a tragedy that smells faintly of amber and fear. Meanwhile, outside this bubble of velvet power, reality snarls. France is staggering under debt. Harvests fail. Famine licks at the countryside like a slow fire. But in here, the concerns of the world are translated into polished phrases and unfurled maps. Borders are redrawn with a flick of the wrist. Lives are gambled like coins tossed into a fountain that never runs dry, except when it does. A clerk bends over his ledger, scratching with a quill that squeaks like a dying mouse. Papers rustle like restless ghosts. The hearths spit sparks, smoke curling toward a ceiling painted with illusions of eternal summer. And Louis sits, serene, his profile a coin stamped by destiny, eyes hooded and bright. He speaks of glory as if glory were a fruit he could pluck from a tree. He speaks of war as though it were a garden stroll. And the men around him nod, smile, agree. Because what else can they do? Contradiction isn't strategy. It's suicide. Finally, after hours that crawl like syrup, the business concludes. Decisions are sealed with murmurs and bows, their consequences rippling outward to villages that will never see this room, to soldiers who will bleed in fields they can't name. The ministers withdraw, trailing whispers like comet tails, already plotting their next ascent up this golden scaffolding of power. Louis remains for a moment, motionless, his fingers drumming once against the arm of his chair. Just once. Then he rises. And with that, the entire solar system jolts back into motion. Courtiers swoop in like trained birds, ready to escort the king to his next ritual. The grand couvert. The public meal. The spectacle of appetite where eating is less about hunger and more about hierarchy. The doors swing open, light spills again, voices bloom, and Louis walks out, his heels striking sparks on the parquet, his silhouette dissolving into the glare of 100 candles. Behind him, the council chamber exhales, heavy with the ghost of smoke and secrets. Ahead of him, the dining hall yawns wide, waiting like an open mouth. The council chamber fades behind him, but the stage lights never dim at Versailles. Where others might pause, the sun only shifts his glow. Now, the drama moves to the dining hall, a place where forks and flattery clash louder than swords. Prepare yourself. This is not a meal. This is monarchy served on silver. Imagine this. You're starving. Maybe you skip breakfast because, well, You weren't the king, and your invitation to sip molten chocolate never arrived. Now, someone says, dinner is ready. Relief floods your body. You picture a quiet table, a plate just for you. The sweet privacy of chewing without an audience. Yeah, that's cute. Forget all of it. Because in Versailles, eating isn't a private act. It's theatre. It's a spectacle so extravagant, so ritualized, that you'd think the king was about to marry his own cutlery. Welcome to the Grand Couvert, the royal meal where Louis XIV dines under the relentless gaze of an audience big enough to fill a small opera house. The setting: a hall drenched in gold and candlelight, mirrors multiplying the glow until it looks like the sun exploded indoors. Chandeliers drip crystal tears from a painted ceiling where gods sprawl in lazy triumph. The long dining table gleams like a river of silver, stretching toward eternity, its surface crowded with dishes that shimmer in the heat like mirages. Steam coils upward from tureens, mingling with the sweet bitter smoke of beeswax candles. The air is thick with perfume, with roasted meat, with the faint, unavoidable undercurrent of humanity crammed into brocade. Louis enters, his heels striking sharp notes on the parquet. A ripple runs through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Heads bow, spines bend, fans flutter. The king moves to his chair, no ordinary seat, but a throne disguised as furniture, raised slightly above the others so that, even when seated, he remains a planet and everyone else mere satellites. He sits. The hall exhales, and the meal begins. Now, if you're picturing him digging in with gusto, let's kill that fantasy. Every movement here is choreography. The way he lifts his spoon, the tilt of his wrist, the measured pace of his bites, all of it is performance. Because this isn't about appetite, it's about power. Eating, in this world, is a political act. And nothing screams dominance like having 300 people watch you swallow. Picture it. A hush broken only by the soft clink of silver on porcelain, the muted rustle of skirts, the creak of corseted bodies shifting for a better view. Courtiers lean forward, necks craning, eyes wide, because even this mundane ritual, the slow cutting of a slice of meat, is loaded with meaning. Will the king look up? Will he nod? Will he speak? A single word can ignite a career or snuff it out like a candle. And the food. Oh, the food. Mountains of roasted game, their skins lacquered to a glossy sheen, platters of capons stuffed with truffles, fish shimmering like molten silver, hauled that very morning from the royal ponds. Tarts glistening with candied fruits, creams so rich they could make angels weep. It's abundance to the point of obscenity. And yet, Louis eats sparingly. A few bites here, a morsel there. Because restraint, in a hall drowning in excess, is its own kind of flex. Meanwhile, the courtiers watch and suffer. Their stomachs snarl like chained dogs, but they won't taste a crumb. The Grand Couvert isn't a dinner party. It's a live-streamed mukbang where the influencer eats, and you just vibe. Sure, a few lucky souls might snag a bone or a crust if fortune smiles, but only after the king rises and declares the feast over. Until then, starvation in silk. Listen closely now. Beyond the faint clatter of serving spoons, you can hear it. Whispers slithering through the hall like smoke. Flattery dressed as conversation. Gossip sharp enough to draw blood. Who sat where? Who's looking smug? Who dared to laugh too loudly? In Versailles, the seating plan is a map of power, and tonight's arrangement will be dissected until dawn by people whose lives depend on proximity to the royal jawline. The king chews, slowly, thoughtfully, his face an unreadable mask of serenity. Behind the mask, perhaps he's tasting more than food, the tang of triumph, the spice of paranoia. Because this table isn't just a stage for display, it's a battlefield. Every glance a volley, every smile a truce, every raised eyebrow a declaration of war. And Louis, as always, is the general who never blinks. Hours crawl by in a haze of candlelight and roasted flesh. Plates arrive, plates vanish, servants glide like phantoms. The scent of meat thickens the air, clinging to lace cuffs, sinking into wigs powdered with flour that now smells faintly of gravy. Sweat beads at temples, despite the winter chill outside. Somewhere, a violin sighs a melancholy strain, because what's a feast without a soundtrack? Finally, the king sets down his knife. A ripple jolts through the room like an electric shock. Valets surge forward, clearing plates with military precision. The courtiers bow so low their wigs teeter, vertebrae groaning under centuries of etiquette. Louis dabs his lips with a napkin finer than most wedding veils. Then he rises, and with that, the hall exhales in one collective sigh of exhaustion and relief. But the night isn't over. Oh no. Versailles doesn't do casual evenings. Ahead lies music, dance, conversations honeyed and barbed. Perhaps a masked flirtation or two. And later, much later, the grand finale. Le coucher. The royal bedtime ritual that turns even undressing into a public sacrament. For now, though, the king glides from the hall, leaving behind a wake of candle smoke, perfume, and the lingering ache of hunger in 300 bellies. His heels click on marble. His shadow stretches long across the mirrored walls. And in that shadow, fortunes rise and fall without a single word spoken. Dusk is falling on Versailles, and with it, a transformation. The sunlight that once slashed through mirrored halls now softens, curling into pools of molten gold across the parquet floors. Servants glide in shadows, snuffing wicks, lighting fresh candles, their flames shivering like nervous courtiers. But outside, outside is where the real alchemy happens. Step through those towering glass doors and feel the air change. Gone is the heavy sweetness of perfume and roasted meat. Here, the evening breathes cold and clean, sharpened by frost, and the faint spice of orange blossom drifting from the orangery below. The gardens sprawl before you, not gardens really, but an empire of green, sculpted with such ruthless precision it makes geometry blush. This is no idle pleasure ground. This is propaganda. Miles of terraces and hedges, fountains tossing silver arcs into the bruised sky, avenues stretching so straight they look like they were drawn with the edge of a blade, nature tamed and shackled in golden chains. Every tree, every topiary, every inch of gravel screams a single message. The king commands the earth itself. The Sun King steps onto the terrace, his silhouette framed by the last blush of sunset. Behind him, the tide of courtiers follows, their silks sighing, jewels winking like dying stars. They spill onto the marble steps in a shimmer of brocade and ambition, laughter dripping like honeyed poison, whispers slithering through the chill. Listen. Hear it? The crunch of fine gravel under red heels, the distant roar of the fountains, their waters hurled skyward in defiance of gravity by an army of hidden pipes and pumps. Fun fact, those fountains didn't run all the time. Too expensive, too thirsty. They performed like actors, springing to life only when the king was near, gushing with obedient ecstasy, then falling silent the moment he turned his back. Even water knew its place in Versailles. The air smells of damp earth and clipped boxwood, threaded with the ghost of smoke from torches guttering in the evening breeze. A trace of musk curls from perfume bodies, mingling with the clean bite of frost. Above, the first stars prick the velvet sky, but their light pales beside the glow of 1,000 lanterns strung like fallen constellations along the balustrades. Versailles at night isn't darkness. It's daylight rewritten in gold. Louis walks slowly, hands clasped behind his back, every movement measured. He pauses here, tilts his head there, and the crowd reacts like a single organism, freezing, laughing, rippling forward on some invisible cue. They think they're strolling. They're not. They're orbiting. Because here, even leisure is a performance. Even silence is strategy. Conversations bloom and die in the cold air, soft as petals. One courtier murmurs about the play to be staged next week. Another wonders, with a smile sharp enough to cut, whether Madame de Maintenon will attend tonight's music. Beneath the sugar lies arsenic. Every word a move in a game older than sin. And the gardens listen, or seem to. Their avenues stretch like sentences without full stops. Their hedges crouch like silent juries. Statues of marble gods peer down with blank, cold eyes as though amused by this mortal masquerade. In the distance, Apollo gleams in gilded triumph at the center of his fountain, Louis's favorite emblem. The sun crowning the sun. Subtlety. Never heard of her. Fun fact for you, these gardens weren't built by magic. They devoured fortunes, swallowed lives. Thousands of laborers bent their backs to carve symmetry out of chaos, hauling stone, shifting earth, coaxing water along miles of hidden channels. Men broke, men died, so that hedges could stand like soldiers and fountains could leap on command. And all for what? So that centuries later, you could listen to me whisper about how breathtakingly beautiful tyranny looks in moonlight. Louis pauses at the edge of the Grand Canal, that gleaming ribbon slicing the gardens in two. The water lies black and still, mirroring the lantern glow in broken shards. A boat drifts lazily in the distance, a pleasure barge, oars dipping with soundless grace. Somewhere music sighs, the thin, plaintive thread of a violin floating from the terrace behind, twining with the crisp night air. It smells of frost now, and firelight, and something else. The slow burning fuse of hunger. Not for food, for power. Always power. The king turns, his wig haloed in torchlight, his face carved from serenity. He smiles, a soft, inscrutable curve, and the crowd erupts in murmurs sweet enough to rot teeth. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone else chokes on their own ambition. And through it all, Louis moves like a god on holiday, a man whose pulse is the metronome of a nation. But this calm, this delicate, perfumed stillness, it's an illusion stretched thin as gold leaf. Because beyond these clipped parterres and whispering hedges, beyond the glassy lakes and groves stitched into grids, the real world waits. A world of hunger, mud, and muskets. A world that doesn't know or doesn't care that the king's fountains sing for no one but him. Louis knows it too, which is why, when he stops at the top of the marble staircase and casts his gaze toward the hunting forest, sprawled beyond the gardens, his eyes sharpen. The next act is already stirring in his blood. The hunt, his passion, his theatre of dominance played out not in silk, but in scarlet and mud. He turns. The torches flare. The gardens watch in silence as the sun slips back toward his golden cage, trailed by his murmuring constellation. Behind them, the fountains fall still. One by one, their silver voices dying into darkness like secrets swallowed by night. The gardens sleep, their symmetry dissolving into shadow. But the king does not sleep. He hungers for motion, for mastery, for the primal music of horns in the cold air. Tomorrow, the forest will echo with hoofbeats and the cry of hounds. Ready to ride? The hunt awaits. The Grand Couvert has ended, but Louis XIV is far from done. The taste of truffle-laced broth still lingers on the tongue, and yet something feral hums under the silk. Candlelight and applause can only feed so much. What the Sun King craves now is movement, raw, unbridled, dangerous enough to feel real. Not another game of cards in a gilded cage, not a dance of hollow compliments. Number, he wants the chase. The announcement is quiet, almost casual. The king rides, but the ripple it sends through Versailles, earthquake. Courtiers scatter like startled birds, lunging for boots, gloves, hats, anything that might disguise the panic blooming in their eyes. Because an invitation to hunt with Louis isn't a polite request, it's a coronation in miniature. To be seen galloping at his side is to rise. To stumble is to die. Socially, which in Versailles is the only death that counts. The chill outside slices like glass as the king steps into the courtyard. Behind him, the palace blazes in molten light, mirrors spitting back 1,000 fractured suns. Ahead, the world smells of leather, hay, and the hot, metallic tang of horse sweat. Hooves ring on cobblestones, sharp as musket fire. Hounds coil in a frenzy of muscle and sound, their cries twisting through the dusk like torn ribbons. Servants dart and bow, their breath fogging the air, hands fumbling with stirrup straps slick from haste. Then Louis appears in his hunting attire, a vision in crimson and gold. Scarlet coat hugging his frame, buttons winking like captured stars, boots polished to the gleam of black ice. A plumed hat perches above the tidal wave of his powdered wig, feathers trembling in the cold wind. His gloves are pearl white. They will not be pearl white for long. He mounts in a single fluid motion, settling into the saddle with the inevitability of sunrise. Around him, the favored few scramble to do the same. Their faces gleam with practiced joy, though inside, their stomachs churn like winter rivers. Because this is not sport. This is a crucible disguised as pleasure. The horns blare, a raw, brazen note that hurls itself against the forest edge and shatters the twilight. Hooves strike, sparks spit. The cavalcade surges forward in a thunder of flesh and frost. The park unfurls ahead, vast and wild in curated perfection. A hunting ground carved from chaos, stitched to Versailles like an emerald wing. The rhythm of pursuit pounds through bone and blood. Horns scream, hounds erupt in a rolling tide of sound, their bays punching holes in the brittle air. The forest convulses with motion, branches whipping, leaves clawing, frost snapping under iron hooves. Horses snort clouds of steam, their flanks slick, their breath ghosting like pale spirits in flight. And at the eye of this storm, Louis. His scarlet coat blazes through the gloom like a comet. His body fluid, his control absolute. He doesn't cling. He rules. The reins are silk between his fingers. The stallion bends like a bow, vaulting fallen trunks with a grace that mocks gravity. Behind him, courtiers scatter, their smiles frozen masks stretched over panic. Wigs tilt at treacherous angles. Lace cuffs darken with mud. Somewhere, a hat dies in a ditch. The quarry, a stag flanked slick with fear, bolts through the underbrush, its white tail a flickering ghost. The hounds streak after it, an arrow of muscle and fury. And over it all rolls the music of the chase, horns clashing like brazen trumpets of war, the pounding drumbeat of hooves, the ragged tenor of breaths sucked through teeth, clenched against terror and cold. Imagine the irony. They call it a hunt, but the real prey isn't running on four legs. It's clinging to saddles, praying to invisible saints, bargaining with fate that today is not the day they break their neck in front of God's anointed son. Because out here, failure is fatal. Not in flesh, but in favor. Lag behind, and your name becomes a stain whispered in corridors. Leap like a hero, and you might just dine closer to the king tomorrow. Versailles turns even blood sport into networking. Hours unravel like silk torn by thorns. The stag falters. The hounds close. The last horn tears the sky with triumph, sharp as steel. The deer goes down in a froth of snow and crimson, its breath puffing like dying prayers into the cold. A cheer rises, thin, perfunctory, because no one cares about the deer. The real kills are invisible, scored in the hush of glances, the ledger of smiles. Louis dismounts, boots biting into frost. He stands calm, radiant in scarlet, his breath steaming in the gloaming. Around him, courtiers cluster, faces flushed, laughter pitched a note too high, every compliment a blade wrapped in silk. And the king? He accepts it all with the serene indifference of a god distracted by weather. Then, with a flick of his gloved hand, the scene dissolves. Horses wheel. The cavalcade snakes back toward the palace, trailing mist, sweat, and whispers that smell of ambition. Behind them, the forest exhales, knitting shut the wounds of hoof and horn. Ahead, Versailles swells on the horizon, a golden hallucination blazing against the indigo night, its windows vomiting light into the darkness like molten rivers. And inside, another stage waits, a hall dripping with mirrors and fire, music tuning like a beast in heat, perfume coiling through corridors like sin. Because tonight, the performance isn't galloping, it's gliding. Not horns, but violins. Not hoofbeats, but the susurration of silk on marble. The cold taste of wind fades from his tongue, replaced by honeyed strains of music, bleeding from the palace. The hunt is over. But the night, oh, the night is just unfurling its golden wings. Ready to step into the blaze, let's follow the king back into the fire. The palace glows like a sun dragged down to earth and split into 1,000 flickering pieces. Outside, the frost bites. The forest sleeps under a silver hush. But inside, the night blooms like molten honey. Step through those towering doors and drown in the blaze. Candles seethe in their crystal cages, their flames breeding in mirrors until the air itself looks aflame. Chandeliers sag from ceilings painted with gods lounging in impossible skies, their golden limbs frozen mid-caress. Beeswax drips in slow, viscous tears, feeding a light so warm, so thick, it could smother you. The parquet gleams beneath 100 restless feet, waxed to a treacherous gloss. And everywhere, are faces lacquered in powder and rouge, floating like masks in a carnival of glass. Music coils through the air, slow and serpentine. The first notes of a minuet, sighed by violins whose varnished ribs shiver under the scrape of horsehair. The sound unfurls across the marble like spilled syrup, clinging sweet and sticky. And into that sound glides the court, an eddy of brocades and jewels, silks frothing like sugared cream, diamonds winking like malice in candlelight. They don't walk. They orbit, spinning in perfect figures, steps plotted with the cold precision of geometry. This isn't dancing. It's diplomacy performed in silk. And then he enters. Louis XIV, the Sun King. Not in hunting crimson now, but a blaze of molten gold stitched with fire. His coat is a miracle of embroidery. Threads of metal snaring the light like nets cast for stars. Jewels bloom across his chest like frozen flowers. His wig, a powdered storm cascading in immaculate curls, throws shadows that lick the walls. A plume trembles in his hat like the last sigh of a conquered bird. He moves with the inevitability of dawn. Slow, unhurried, each step a decree. The room tilts, heads bow in waves, spines bending like reeds in a golden gale. Fans flutter like startled doves, hiding mouths curved in counterfeit smiles. And then, he smiles. Software small, just enough to make 50 hearts detonate with relief. He drifts forward, swallowed by the orbiting constellations of dancers. The minuet blooms. Men glide like blades wrapped in velvet. Women dip. Skirts swishing in arcs that breathe whispers of starch and lavender. Hands brush, hover, retreat. Eyes dart behind masks of powder, flashing promises or daggers. And through it all runs the pulse of calculation. Who danced near the king? Who stumbled? Who wore sapphire when the queen wore blue? Versailles is a ballroom, yes. But tonight, it's also a battlefield disguised in brocade. Listen closely. Beneath the music's honeyed sigh, another sound coils, whispers, slick as oil. Names hissed like curses, rumours slithering through the candle smoke. Madame danced twice with Monsieur. Scandalous. Did you see Mademoiselle's necklace? A gift, they say, from someone whose wife breathes yet. Every syllable is a knife, honed and dipped in sugar. In this room, even laughter has an edge sharp enough to split bone. At the far end, the theatre yawns, a gilt-framed moor swelling with velvet curtains. Later, the actors will spill illusions across its boards. Molière, perhaps. Lines slick with satire, barbs hidden under ruffles. The courtiers will titter behind their fans, pretending the venom isn't meant for them. Pretending they aren't laughing at their own reflection in the polished blade of wit. And when the play ends, the real games begin. Cards slapped on velvet, dice rattling like bones in graves. Voices rise, laughter thick and false, sticky with desperation. Fortunes crack like spun sugar. Lives tilt on the tumble of cubes small enough to choke a saint. Here, in the hum of gambling salons, ambition bares its teeth. And the king? He hovers at the edges, luminous, serene, a god amused by mortals gnawing at one another for crumbs of his light. But not all hungers are fed by coin. Watch the corners, where shadows knot like lovers' fingers, eyes snare eyes across the lacquered floor, a hand lingers too long on the stem of a glass, a fan FLX, a code older than sin. Versailles is a feast, and bodies are courses served under silver lids of secrecy. Scandal simmers under the crust of etiquette, fattening on silence, sweetening in whispers. Hours thicken. Candles gutter, their flames drooling wax. The air sours, overripe perfume fermenting with sweat. Wine, and the faint animal tang of powdered wigs beginning to wilt. Jewels weigh like debts. Laughter curdles. The music limps, bows rasping like tired lungs. And still, no one leaves. Because the last act hasn't played. The grand finale. The ritual where power strips naked, inch by inch, under the gaze of eyes that never blink. Le coucher. Already, the crowd begins to shift, coiling into currents that spill toward the king's private apartments. Faces flush with fatigue, but no one dares surrender. To miss the coucher is to vanish, to fade from the sun's heat into the frost of oblivion. They trail him through the mirrored corridors. their whispers furring the air like frost lace on glass. Behind them, the ballroom exhales. A dying star collapsing in a sigh of smoke and wax. Ahead, the golden chamber waits, curtains swelling in the breath of unseen draughts, shadows twitching under the weight of 1,000 eyes. Here, the night tightens to a point. Here, the performance sheds its last veil. The violins are silent now, their echoes snuffed like wicks. Candles gutter low, bleeding light across mirrors warped with smoke. And in the hush, the king steps into his sanctuary, a stage for the strangest theatre of all, ready to watch a god dismantle himself thread by thread. Follow me. The music has died. Its echoes cling like smoke to the mirrored walls, trembling before the hush that follows. The salons lie behind, sagging under the weight of spent laughter and souring perfume. Candles drip their last tears into darkness. But here in the king's bedchamber, the blaze still burns. Step inside. The air is thick with heat, but not the fevered heat of dance. This is a slower fire, curling in the breath of 100 candles drowning in their own wax. Shadows prowl along gilt panels, fattened on the tremor of flames. The walls whisper back your footsteps, padded by tapestries breathing the musk of centuries. And in the center of this golden hush waits the stage. A bed so vast, so swollen with velvet and embroidery, it could smother a family of 5 without noticing. Drapes sag in folds heavy as gilt, dyed in the colours of spilled wine and fresh blood. Before it stands Louis XIV, still sheathed in splendour. The coat, stiff with jewels that wink like frost. The waistcoat, brocade snarling with gold thread. The wig, a powdered cataract spilling down his shoulders, exhaling faint ghosts of lavender and starch. His boots flash red in the lamplight, soles glimmering like drops of coagulated sunset. He looks untouched by time, by sweat, by the blur of hours. And yet, watch closely. See it? The faint drag in his breath, the glassy sheen on his brow, the soft slack at the corners of a mouth that has held command like a blade all day long. The courtiers see it too, but only in secret, behind eyes that flicker like gnats in candlelight. Outwardly, they beam, they bow, they choreograph their souls into arcs of reverence. Because this is the coucher, the royal undressing, the last act in a masque that began at dawn with the lever. Bookends of theatre, bracketing a day carved from ceremony. And every moment tonight will be scored, tallied, whispered about in boudoir, reeking of powder until dawn stains the sky. The ritual begins. A low murmur, soft as incense smoke. The evening prayer coiling through the hush like a thread of ash. Heads dip, lips flutter. And then the stripping starts. Not of power, but of its trappings. First, the gloves. A duke steps forward, hands trembling as if cradling the grail, to peel them from royal fingers pale as milk. Next, the coat, shrugged from his shoulders like a discarded planet, its weight folding into the arms of a marquis who once commanded armies and now stands thrilled to hold another man's laundry. The waistcoat follows, buttons loosed with the slowness of liturgy, lace sighs as it slithers free, stockings roll down in pale spirals, their silk murmuring against skin flushed by the press of brocade. Shoes drop with soft, percussive thuds onto the carpet, their crimson heels flashing like the last pulse of sunset before night seals the sky. And through it all, the murmurs, the little gasps greased with envy, the whispers folded into the rustle of fabric. Who bore the gloves? Who touched the buttons? These are the metrics of survival here. where favour clings like scent and rots as quickly, if not tended with obeisance. Now, the wig, the apex. A valet advances bearing a cushion fat with velvet, its surface gaping to cradle this powdered leviathan. Fingers probe, lift. The curls quake, snowing a fine mist of starch and stale lavender into the candlelight. For a moment, Louis stands bareheaded, scalp gleaming like a pale moon robbed of its clouds. His eyes flicker, briefly, naked in a way no silk could shield. Then, the nightshirt billows forward, soft as a sigh, swallowing him whole in its bleached simplicity. The sun retreats behind muslin clouds. Fun fact, privacy in Versailles was a myth. Even now, even here, the king undresses under a siege of eyes. Dignitaries pack the chamber like lacquered saints in a golden reliquary, their gazes sucking every detail like flies drunk on honey. Imagine it. You peeling off your socks before bed, cheered on by 100 throats humming prayers. Nightmare fuel, isn't it? Unless you're Louis. For him, it's oxygen. Attention is the blood in his veins. Strip that away, and the sun gutters into a man shivering under the weight of silence. The prayers curl to an end. Silence drops like velvet. Only the gutter of candles and the faint, animal rasp of breathing stains the hush. Then, he moves. Climbs into the bed, its linens fat with scent, with warmth, with the ghosts of 1,000 whispered ambitions. The curtains swoop, drowning the room in shadows fattened with gold. And with that, the day exhales. A day stitched from spectacle, perfumed with lies, lacquered in rituals that gleam like jewels but cut like glass. Behind the curtains, perhaps he dreams of hunts that never end, of mirrored halls splitting his image into infinity, of a world held together by the glue of his will. Or perhaps he doesn't dream at all. Perhaps kings, like suns, burn too hot for sleep. The courtiers retreat in ripples, their steps sucked into the hush. The candles sag in their sockets, spitting ghosts of smoke. Outside, frost snarls across the lawns, knitting white scars into the darkness. And Versailles itself seems to sigh, its golden ribs aching under the weight of silence. Until dawn pries its jaws apart again, and the lever yanks the king and the world back into orbit. The day is done, but the theatre never ends. And that, dear sleepless rabble, was a day in the life of Louis XIV, gold that never stopped glittering, perfume thick enough to choke a saint, and more rules than an Apple Terms of Service update. Imagine living in a world where even taking off your shoes was a group project. Exhausting, isn't it? So tell me, would you thrive in Versailles, bowing and curtsying your way to glory, or fake a fainting spell just to escape the smell? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know who's Team Royal Glam and who's Team No Thanks. I like my privacy. If this little trip through powdered wigs and politics gave you a smirk, or at least kept you from doom scrolling into oblivion, be a legend. Tap like, hit subscribe, join the court. We've got less backstabbing than Versailles and way better snacks. And hey, if you're feeling extra generous, toss a shiny coin over at kofi.com/NAPMAX. No powdered wig required. This is Napmax Sleep Stories, and you've just endured a day in Versailles, the drama behind Louis XIV's perfect wig. Sleep well, or at least better than the courtiers stuffed into those drafty salons.